My alarm would usually go off at 3:30 or 4 every morning. I would do 2 hours on the bike. I would then go to the gym. I would then work my 9 to 5, and then I would have 2 or 3 hours on the bike after work. A lot of people set big goals, but then they're not willing to make the sacrifices that are necessary to achieve those.
This is the outright record, the Land's End to John Groat's double. There's no one faster in the world that has covered that distance.
The record was always my secondary objective, but the primary objective was to just find my limits, like physically and mentally. Also as a way to close the chapter on all the versions of my life I didn't get to live. As a young adult, I was a future Olympian. I was going to be representing my country at the highest levels. I had some injuries, and after surgery, I had developed a disease of my autoimmune system and my nervous system. I went from highly confident and capable young woman to someone who needed 24/7 care.
What I find remarkable is the fact that you did it with a very short span of time of being a cyclist.
Yeah, I actually got my first road bike 3 weeks before our record attempt started. My illness gave me a new capability to withstand discomfort and endure. My story should show people that they're capable of doing incredible things. You still have power. You can still make a decision when things derail you. It's your choice whether you want to give up or try something new and knock on a new door. So I just knocked on a new door, and thankfully it worked out for me.
I live a nomadic lifestyle, and I'm never in one place for too long. So from time to time, I find it very convenient to order groceries in the form of a Gusto box. I've been using Gusto for nearly 5 years now. It's a delivery company that sends you fresh food and all the ingredients you need to cook delicious meals at home, along with very easy to follow recipe cards. They have over 90 recipes every week, so there really is something for everyone. And so many of their recipes I've returned to again and again because their meals are just delicious. I've got a referral code. I've shared it with so many of my friends. It means they get cheap groceries on their first few boxes and I get credit in return. I'll link it below. Use it to sign up and you get a pretty hefty discount off your first box. There's no subscription required and you can order just one box whenever you want. Thank you, Sarah, for joining me. I really appreciate you giving the time so soon after completing such an epic feat. I have been awe-inspired seeing your journey and amazed by what you've achieved. We're going to deep dive into it in a minute, but how are you now? How is the body?
Thank you. Yeah, delighted to be here. Body is recovering. My aerobic system is strong. My muscular and nervous systems are slowly beginning to recover a few weeks post-event now. So I'm feeling good.
How is the saddle sores? I heard that you were in bandages for quite a while afterwards.
Yes, this has been a popular topic, actually. The saddle sores are fully healed now. But yeah, I was in bandages for about 2 weeks post-event. So not pleasant, but we're on the road to recovery.
Okay. What does your recovery look like? Is there a planned kind of set time that you have for this?
Yeah, so it's partly intuitive and emotional based on how I'm feeling and partly, just kind of physically like ramping it up. So the way my coaches and I approached recovery is about 5 days after the event. I was really doing nothing. I was horizontal and just recovering. And then we slowly introduced some stretching and some light mobility because my body had just completely locked up like a brick. And then over the last week or two, I've started reintroducing the bike, but just really lightly, like 30 minutes to 1 hour of light spinning. And now that I'm 3 weeks post-event, I'm back riding 7 days a week, just at less volume. And I'm reintroducing my strength training, but at more manageable weights now. So I'm in the gym about 4 days a week now.
That's insane that you're back on the bike 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's because I can handle a lot of capacity and a lot of volume. So prior to the event, I was in the saddle up to 30 hours a week. So I think when you are capable of handling high capacity and volume, your recovery tends to be a little bit faster. So for that, I'm really grateful. But I'm also really tracking my emotional recovery and just making sure that I'm not feeling overwhelmed when I'm on the bike.
Sounds like you got some good support behind you as well in helping you. It's remarkable, not just what you achieve, but what you are doing to kind of continue that going forward. I know you have big plans of what you want to achieve in the future already, and not settling down to just having some time off the bike, which anyone would be completely understandable if you wanted to do that. Let's dive into the story. There's a lot to cover. It's a story of resilience, of mental toughness, overcoming physical adversity, enduring a rapid personal and physical transformation. I think it's also about being bold enough to set the most incredible goal and the sheer grit and determination to see it through to completion. It's about pushing human limits, breaking gender barriers, and inspiring others along the way. So let's talk about what you did. The challenge. The Land's End to John O'Groats double.
Yeah.
It's not just doing it one way, which is so many people, especially in British culture, it's like it's the challenge of a lifetime. It's what people do. They train and they go and do it over a few days, a few weeks, and they achieve it. They get from one side to another. And then maybe a few years later, they might consider doing it the opposite direction. But now there's this thing where you do it twice in a record time.
Yeah. It sounds a bit overwhelming when you put it that way. Yeah, it was a privilege of a lifetime to be able to take on the challenge, not just once, but do it both ways. And I think what really attracted me to doing LEJOG, Land's End, John O'Groats Land's End, was just the fact that it pushed the definition of endurance while introducing extra complexities like sleep, how the crew was going to manage the logistics of constantly being in motion for a week, and then just mental resilience. So I really wanted to kind of explore that space where when most people finish, you'd only be halfway done. So it was just an incredible thing to be a part of, and to be surrounded by so many people who just wanted to see me win was just the privilege of a lifetime.
So let's talk through the stats of it. The total distance.
2,720 kilometers.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
The record before you started was?
The record before me was held by James McDonald, who completed the similar distance. We had slightly different routes, but he completed the similar distance in 5 days, 18 hours, and 3 minutes.
And then there was a female record.
That's correct.
Louise Harris, 10 days, 5 hours. And I should also shout out to Marsha Roberts. I think he's the first official woman to do it, I think back in 2020. She took 11 days, 13 hours, 13 minutes. There's a huge difference between the female record and the male record. As you see it, there's a difference of about 5 days or so, roughly. Why did you go and set yourself a challenge to get the outright record?
That's a great question. I think for me, it's interesting because the record was always my secondary objective. We anchored to the record because that would allow me to push my limits. And that was what we thought was within my capability set. If I stretched and was able to kind of anchor to that when it came to my pacing and my power on the bike. But the primary objective for me in doing the challenge was to just find my limits, like physically and mentally, and see how far I could go if I was supported in riding my bike. And so that was the main challenge, was to find my own personal limits. But we thought by anchoring to the outright record, that would give me an aggressive target that would help push me to that. So the fact that I was able to surpass the record was just icing on the cake. I mean, the predominantly objective for me was to really just see what I could do.
What I find remarkable is not only setting yourself this goal to go for the all right record across this phenomenal distance, it's the fact that you did it with a very short span of time of being a cyclist. Just over 2 years was all it took for you to be a complete novice on the bike, to then getting your first road bike only months before you then set off to complete this challenge.
Yeah, I actually got my first road bike 3 weeks before our record attempt started. So the entire process for me, I'm somebody my entire life, I love having a deep focus on something, and I love following my interests to the limit of my capabilities. So I've done this my whole life in academics, in sports, and in other hobbies. And for me, cycling, when I got that first bike, I found it really difficult. It didn't come naturally to me. The entire thing was just a fight physically and mentally to learn how to progress. And I really enjoyed leaning into that and learning and understanding where my weaknesses were and finding ways to improve those. So as part of that process, I've been working with a coach for the last year and a half on almost a daily basis. And so that deep focus has really enabled me to kind of find the limits of my capabilities and really progress as quickly as I can. But that took a lot of sacrifice. I had to stop all my other sports. I had to stop a lot of my, social athletic activities to really just focus and lean in on just doing things that would make me better as a cyclist. So while I'm relatively new to cycling, I was, it was almost 30 hours a week at my peak that I was training and learning everything I could and speaking to others who had come before me to get all the advice that I could.
I suppose you became yourself a pro cyclist within your own world, within your own challenges, to make yourself better and better. Doing that much training every week on top of a full-time job.
Yeah.
So what was this balance? How was your time just work and then different work, and that was your life?
Yeah, there was no balance. Balance was not, especially for the last year, balance is not a word that entered my vocabulary. I wasn't training 30 hours a week every week. So over the winter, we did reverse periodization, where we focused less time on the bike, but more time building power in our max VO2 and getting stronger. So
how did you do that?
So it would be shorter, sharper sessions on the bike. So it would be more intensity and less volume. So we'd be, working max efforts. We would be lifting really heavy in the gym. And I would be maybe about 14, 15 hours a week in the saddle and maybe 5 hours a week in the gym. So about 20 hours a week training. And then as we progressed towards the record attempt, my time in the saddle increased to 28 to 30 hours a week. My time in the gym decreased to about 3 or 4 hours a week. So what this meant, I guess, from a lifestyle perspective, is I had to sacrifice almost everything socially. So my alarm would usually go off at 3:30 or 4 every morning. I would do 2 hours on the bike. I would then go to the gym. I would then work my 9 to 5, and then I would have 2 or 3 hours on the bike after work. And then I would have long rides on the weekends. But I think this is a necessary structure if you have big goals. A lot of people set big goals, but then they're not willing to make the sacrifices that are necessary to achieve those. So I was very honest with myself when I started this project, and I really had to have a conversation with myself and say, am I willing, to sacrifice, all of my free time for this for the next 8-9 months? And for me, the answer was yes, but it wasn't easy.
Why were you willing to sacrifice so much to build towards this goal?
I think naturally, I love deep focus and I love finding the limits of my capabilities. And so for me, the learning process is really rewarding. And so I thought of this as a gift to myself, actually, and an investment in myself and my own physical and kind of mental capability building. So it was a privilege for me to be able to, access the coaches I did, have the equipment that I did, and the lifestyle that I have to really deep dive into this. So I did it, I suppose, as a gift to myself, and also as a way to close the chapter on all the versions of my life I didn't get to live, the athletic versions of me that, no longer really existed after my illness. So I really wanted to prove to myself that I was still capable, even if that capability looked different than it did in the past.
Let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah.
Growing up, you were incredibly sporty and athletic and were such a high achiever within the world of sport.
Yeah, when I was young back in the day, I guess it was identified from an early age that I had a natural inclination towards running. And so my parents put me in a track and field club. And in the space of a few years as a young adult, I held national records in 3 different distances. I ran a Commonwealth Games qualifying time, and I was one of the youngest people in history to achieve world qualifying standard in my middle distance events. So from a young age, I've worked with coaches and I've had that mindset of hard work and discipline instilled in me.
And what happened?
What happens? It happened very quickly. So I was preparing for a bid for the Junior Olympics, and I had some injuries to the tendons and ligaments in my feet. So I made a decision with my family and with my orthopedic surgeon to have a very minor operation on both feet at the same time to correct it. This meant I'd be in a wheelchair for about a month or so, but it would mean I could be on the track again almost instantly. So I had those operations and they went smoothly. But what happened afterwards is I stopped healing and my wounds weren't healing, and I basically was getting increased pain instead of decreasing pain after surgery. And what had happened is I had developed a disease of my autoimmune system and my nervous system. And over the course of about 2 months, I lost the ability to move the joints in my legs, and I lost the ability to move my arms and my hands as well. So I became almost fully immobilized.
How old were you then?
I was about 16. Yeah, and the condition that it is known as one of the most painful conditions in modern medicine. So not only could I not move, but I was in extreme pain because my nervous system was essentially attacking my body. So I went from highly confident and capable young woman to someone who needed 24/7 care.
And at an age where you're just beginning to, work out what the world is about, experiencing new things, find self-confidence and build yourself into, becoming a young adult, so much of that was stripped away from you at that time.
Yeah, my entire identity was stripped away from me. And I think when you're young and you're celebrated for what your capabilities are and what you're achieving, it's very easy to have your identity linked to your successes. And so for me, I was always a runner. I was a future Olympian. I was going to be representing my country at the highest levels. And then when that is just taken away from you, especially as a young adult, you're left not really knowing who you are or what you stand for. So for me, the impacts of this weren't really felt until after I was through rehabilitation and I actually had time to process what had happened to me. But it was quite a shock and a very difficult process trying to redevelop who I was and understand what I wanted to achieve out of life again.
And that becomes your new identity, which is not what anyone wants to have as their identity. And it's forced upon you.
Yeah.
How long did rehabilitation take to get you to a state where you could feel you could be as physically normal as someone else?
It took, I would say, about 3 years. So I was in, a wheelchair or hospital bed for a while. And then I worked with different occupational and physical therapists to really start developing my movement again. So, using my hands, my arms, those probably came back easiest. And that probably took about a year or so. And then having to get up out of the chair, transition to walking. We started walking in the pool and moving my joints that way. And then we progressed with various assisted devices like walkers or walking sticks. So I would say it took about maybe 3 years end to end. But then I was out living my life, just not necessarily an athletic one, for about 8-9 years after that, because I really didn't trust my body to not hurt me again. And while I looked fully capable, I still had a lot of invisible disabilities. My balance, I really struggle with my balance. I still do to this day. And I had a lot of healthcare issues. So I had lost about 40% of my body weight. So I was very underweight, probably quite unhealthy. So it took me a very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you redefine yourself when the shit hits the fan and you've had to go through years of this recovery, forming a different version of yourself, which was not the path that you were going on?
How do I redefine myself? Yeah. At the time, I didn't know how to do it. It was a process. So off the back of my recovery, I was actually fortunate enough to receive a lot of mental health help. It was never something that was stigmatized in my family. So I received a lot of counseling. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD after the illness. So that was something I really had to work through. And in that process of working through that, I came to really understand that we don't have to be one thing. Identity can be complex and multifaceted. So my process of reforming who I was just being curious. And that's what led me to academics and to progressing through to my doctorate. That was one facet of my identity I really wanted to explore while I wasn't really physically capable of doing much. And then after that, once I turned back to athletics, I started exploring this side of myself again. But for me now, I think my lesson about identity is really that we should anchor who we are to characteristics or values that are inalienable to us. So for me, I now identify as determined or stubborn or strong. I don't identify myself by my achievements or what I'm doing. And that's been really transformative for me and helped me build a lot of stability and confidence throughout my life.
Mm-hmm. And gratitude.
And gratitude, of course.
Which is something I know which you write about a lot. Tell me what that means to you.
Gratitude to me means it's most powerful for me when I'm going through difficult things, self-imposed, like the record attempt or not. It basically just means that in every moment of struggle, you need to stop and you need to think of how grateful I am to actually be in this position and to be feeling the struggle and have the capabilities, the tools, and the resources around me to manage it. And it also means recognizing the people around me who are making my experiences possible and all the love and support that I'm so privileged to have around me. And that came through in, this record that we did. I had the words focus, discipline, and gratitude taped to my bars. And gratitude was really recognizing all the people that were showing up for me and recognizing that I had a body that was capable of doing this again. And that really got me through the really difficult periods.
Just jumping in briefly to say, if you've got this far, you're probably a fan of the show. And it would be great if you wouldn't mind confirming that love by following or subscribing to this podcast. It takes just one click from you, but it really does make a huge difference in getting more people to find this show. Thank you. I want to talk about this incredible body that you have built up to be able to do this incredible feat. Am I right in thinking that the cycling and this record wasn't the first instance of what you wanted to achieve to kind of set the record straight, in a sense? There was other plans before this.
Correct. Yes. So originally, I went back to running after my illness because I didn't learn my lesson the first time. And I found that while I no longer had the power and speed that I had of my youth, my illness gave me a new capability to withstand discomfort and endure. So I started running longer and longer mileage, and I found I was covering the miles quickly and I felt relatively good. So I was actually intending to attempt the world record for running Land's End to John O'Groats, not and back, just one way. But several months before that record, I actually had a few fractures in my femur, your thigh bone. So I had to call it off because my leg wouldn't be strong enough to withstand that pressure. So that triggered a whole sense of loss again and was actually quite upsetting for the second time in my life. But ultimately, that's what led me to pick up a bicycle for the first time. So I suppose it was a gift in disguise.
It's interesting to see how you're so resilient and adaptable in still having this determination to prove something, and you will just pick up any other tool you can and work out what you can do with that.
You have to. I think when you have a drive and you need to fulfill it for whatever reason, you'll always find a way. And I think, you can stop and you can think, why me? Or you can be upset about it, but that doesn't change the fact that it's happening to you. So you still have power. You can still make a decision when things derail you. It's your choice whether you want to give up or try something new and knock on a new door. So I just knocked on a new door, and thankfully it worked out for me.
Would that be your advice for someone who is struggling in their life in some form or other, whether it's physically with, something they've done their whole life, whether it's running or cycling, to take a break and say, actually, I'm just going to sideline this a little bit and just see what else there is in life and explore and be curious?
I think that's incredibly important. I think being curious is very important, because often we get stuck in our comfort zones, or we get anchored to one type of activity. And I think it's a really quick way to kind of lose your joy in it. So I think pausing and reevaluating and not being afraid to try something new could be really powerful. And for me, something that kind of sticks with me is like, embarrassment is the price of entry, right? As adults, we don't usually learn new things. And I think it's really incredible to put yourself in that position where you're a complete beginner and you're kind of forced to learn from others and start from scratch. And that's been really liberating for me. So I would encourage everyone to try it.
Okay. So, what got you attracted to the length of Britain? Is it just from living here for like the past decade and just having a sense of this is the journey that everyone likes to do?
For me, it was about the lore behind it. Whether you're running, cycling, LEJOG, Land's End to John O'Groats just seems to have such mystique about it in British sporting culture. So it's always something that's kind of had my eye, I think. And for no other reason than that, really, I was just curious about it. And it seemed the stories you hear of individuals who achieve the records in various disciplines of this just seem out of this world. And I just thought, I wonder if I could get myself to a point where I could do that. And I knew I'm comfortable with the discipline and the sacrifice needed. So it was just a matter of whether my physical capabilities could rise to meet that goal. So I just figured, life is short. I'm willing to do the work, and let's see if my body can rise to meet me. Okay.
I want to chat about this, but in perhaps parallel to my own experience of cycling, half of your journey by doing Land's End to John O'Groats and stopping there. I did this in 2019 on my own on a touring bike with a bike packing setup with tent and sleeping stuff, and it took me 9 days. That was averaging about 110 miles a day.
That's a good effort still.
It is, yeah. I didn't think I really understood the effort it took to complete it. And actually, at the end of day one, because I started in Cornwall at Land's End, the Cornish hills just absolutely ruined my knees. So I woke up on the second day and my kneecaps cracked as I kind of got off my mat. And I was like, that's never happened before. Don't think that's a good thing. And then for the following 8 days, I just suffered knee pain, and I was always kind of leaning on the back of things and catching up and downing ibuprofen and just grimacing in pain. I was going up climbs when I was like, I should be enjoying this, but I just cannot but it was an incredible thing to accomplish, to get to the end. But I don't think I ever realized how hard it would be by doing it. So that took me 9 days, and maybe with a lighter setup, could have shaved a day off, perhaps. But you did twice the journey in nearly half the time. That gives some extent of your accomplishments. Some people even do LEJOG in longer. They like to do it a bit more leisurely pace, do it over maybe 2 weeks. I think 9 days is the really kind of tight kind of challenge.
Yeah.
Some people can do it shorter, but they will need some kind of support. I think the doing it self-supported, you're generally going to be doing it in around about, I don't know, a week or something like that. That's the one-way journey. So as we talk about this, maybe I can pair some of my own experiences with it. I guess, first of all, I should start with how I probably didn't really know how to train or what to do. And I definitely didn't do any strength work. And I know that's been a big focus of your training. So can you tell me how important it was, even though I think I know that anyway from doing the whole journey, but why that is so important?
Yeah, strength training for anybody doing any type of endurance sport, I cannot emphasize enough how integral it is to not only just preventing injuries, but improving your performance. So for me, I knew I was going to be in the gym between 3 and 5 days a week and not doing little weights. Like I was lifting heavy compound movements overseen by like a strength coach. And in about a year building up to this challenge, I gained about 9-10 kilograms of weight, which is obviously what most cyclists try to avoid. But I did this deliberately to build muscle, to try to basically make my body as bulletproof as possible. And what this training looked like for me in the context of cycling is a lot of core work, a lot of upper body, so shoulders, neck, and back work. And this meant when I was actually in the challenge, I had no neck pain, I had no back pain, and I was completely fine. I had no pain or injuries as a result of this. And I would just say heavy lifting, not ignoring your upper body and ensuring that you're just rock solid will completely transform your performance. So I actually had my strength coach working with my cycling coach to kind of periodize all my training so it all complemented each other for the last 9 months. It was transformative.
It's definitely inspired me in working out how I can adapt my body and build it to be stronger. To, like I said, like being injured on day 2 on a 9-day journey is no fun at all.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with a lot of these endurance sports, it's changing now, but the narrative used to be, you need to be waif thin, you need to be really light. And while you need to be efficient, I don't believe, and I think I'm proof that you don't need to be waif thin. You need to be strong is what you need to be, because that increases resilience. It increases the amount of power that you can sustain over time. So I'm a huge advocate of strength training and gaining muscle.
And how about distance? Were you kind of replicating some of the long cycles?
No. So that was my intuition, and what I thought I would have to do is doing a lot of long rides. And you see a lot of endurance cyclists just trying to do as much mileage as possible. But the lesson my coach really taught me is that everyone can ride a bike far, but not everybody can ride a bike far fast. And the difference is if you're trying to ride a bike far fast, you need to prioritize recovery and you need to prioritize just quality time on the bike. So for me, leading up to this challenge, I didn't do a single ride over 6 hours. I never rode once over 6 hours in length, but I made sure when I was doing those 6-hour rides, I was at the power I needed to hit, I was fueling appropriately, and I was not taking a single stop. So it's about hitting your targets and it's about recovering well so you can build consistency over time. If you go out and smash out a 500K ride on Saturday, but then you can't train for the next week, you're actually putting yourself in a worse situation than if you could train all 5 days that week. So riding less was actually one of my biggest lessons.
And your power that you were doing on that 6-hour ride, was that a replication of what you wanted to be doing for the main event?
It depends where I was at in my training schedule. So about 6 months out from the record attempt, the longer rides, we would be riding at a higher threshold. So we'd probably be more in like high end zone 2 to zone 3, really doing intervals for those 6 hours, just trying to build my resiliency at those higher power outputs. And then as we progressed closer to the event, we actually dropped the power. And that's when I started riding more in the power zones that I would be doing in the ride itself. But typically the lesson is you don't want to increase intensity and volume at the same time. You want to do one or the other. So we started with intensity, then we dropped that and increased volume.
Okay. But you did do some very long distance rides in the form of just little things, the transcontinental. And you did 2 years in a row.
I did, yeah.
The first year as a pair, the second year started as a pair, but actually you became a solo rider.
Yeah.
These who don't know about the transcontinental, these are basically bike races that go across Europe, kind of somewhat self-supported to some extent, but there's checkpoints
Completely
along the way.
self-supported.
Yeah. Distances of like thousands of kilometers.
Yeah, so the one last year, I think we ended up doing about 4,400 kilometers. So we went from France down to Turkey.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were those experiences like? Was this a mindset of just like this? I'm just going to play with this. This is just me gaining experience.
Yeah, so my first one in 2023 absolutely was. So I applied with my friend to the 2023 transcontinental race, not thinking we would get in. Because we had no experience. I didn't even own a bike at the time. And we got in. So I actually had to buy a bike. And we had about 5 months to train for that. And so my first TCR, or transcontinental, was very much that. I figured, well, we'll just, find out and see what it's like. Despite the fact that we had no real experience, we made it to almost the final control point, and we were the third place pair. At that point, I actually ate dirt going down a gravel pass in Greece, and I got a small fracture in my wrist. So unfortunately, we couldn't finish. We were about 400K from the finish line. But that was probably one of my proudest moments, is just realizing that, like, as complete rookies, we could almost make it to the end of one of the hardest races in the world. And I think from there, then that's when I started working with my coach. And I said, okay, I really want to take the safety off and see what I can do next year. So that was last year in 2024. I did that transcontinental number 10. Started as a pair. My pair, unfortunately, had to drop out on the first day. So I finished solo, and that was an incredible experience. It was very challenging, but it also gave me a better understanding of what my capabilities are. And I'm actually quite happy with how it worked out, because I would have never been brave enough to sign up solo. So the fact that I ended up having to do it solo was actually a huge gift for me, because it just forced me to prove to myself that I could do it and I didn't need help.
You've inspired me, someone who said that after I did my own LEJOG, I said, I don't think I'll be entering the transcontinental anytime soon. But in my research for this, I've just been looking at it and been like, if you can apply and you don't own a bike, and then you get in, and then that inspires you to go on this incredible journey, I think next year I'll just put my hat in the ring and see.
I think you should. And what I always say is, what's the worst that could happen? Think about it. You get into the event, it's hard. It's going to be hard. You're going to be uncomfortable. But if you can work through that process and really celebrate that process, then, the worst that's going to happen is you're probably just going to fall off your bike.
Yeah. But I think actually learning about your record-breaking challenge and how you've been able to achieve it, despite everything that you've gone through, is inspiration and testament to the fact that it's made me think, okay, with a bit of focus and, following Sarah's advice, get some strength training in. It's not all about the long rides. Maybe I could, with a year's notice, build myself up to a place where I feel like I could achieve that and celebrate that as well. So I thank you for that, for being that inspiration, because, I feel like I would love to go on a little adventure like that, and seeing some of your videos on your captain's logs. I feel like I do that in the UK, so why not just go and explore some random places in Europe? Yeah,
I think it's so true. And I think what stops most people is self-imposed limitations. They think, oh, that's going to be too scary, or, oh, that's way too far. I could never do that. I'm only riding 100 miles. How could I possibly ride 4,500 kilometers? You can set big goals, but you need to be honest with yourself about where your capabilities are and what you're willing to sacrifice in pursuit of those goals. So, for example, while my story is, I went from novice to world record holder in 2.5 years, what a lot of people don't see is that I didn't get a lot of time with my friends. I didn't get a lot of time with my family. My life was programmed for me 7 days a week. But that's what it took. So I would say set yourself big goals, but be prepared to do the work that's required to do that. But there's no cheat codes. Anyone can do this. I'm an office worker. I work 9 to 5. This is available to everyone. They just need the discipline and the ability to put in the work.
So let's go through your journey. If you don't mind, take us to John O'Groats, your starting point in a beautiful sunny Scottish day. I saw pictures and I was like, okay, when I finished, I couldn't see what was in there's land on the other side of the sea. Wow, there's islands out there.
We lucked out.
Yeah. Your crew, you drove up there. It wasn't your initial first destination. You were wanting to start at the other side, but it was weather just the issue there?
Yeah, so we were originally doing LEJOG, but it turned into LEJOG because we basically made a call about 36 hours out from my start time. We looked at different weather patterns and, probabilities for where the storms would be passing through. And my crew made the decision that we have to start north because there were storms in the south. And we all had to make the drive up, and it worked out for the best because I think we got the best weather window that we've had so far this year. So it was the right decision, even if it kind of threw out our logistics slightly.
Yeah, and I imagine the setting off is a celebration. You're in the fittest form of your life, and you're going off. But how do you mentally approach the fact that you have to return back to this place and you are leaving your destination further and further behind?
I approached that by not thinking about it. So I didn't think about where in the country I was. I didn't know where in the country I was half the time. And I didn't also track my progress versus the existing record holders. So all I focused on, and this should hold true for most endurance athletes, my advice is to develop a process and just focus, meditate on that process. So for me, that was my watts. So the power I was pushing through the bike, my heart rate, and the road 10 meters ahead. If it wasn't one of those three things, I wasn't paying attention to it.
Can you give us details of what those first two were, the watts and your heart rate?
So the watts varied. I tended to not want to go anything over 200 watts. When I was riding. And then my heart rate, I didn't want my heart rate. I don't think it went over 125 for the entire journey. So very, very low heart rate, very efficient riding is what I was focusing on. But my heart rate became less reliable through time. It dropped quite low. So by day 3, I was averaging 119 beats a minute. But then by day 5, it spiked up because my body was under so much stress. But more or less, those are the 3 things I focused on. And then everything else was just peripheral. So if I was uncomfortable, if there's a lot of road traffic, if, somebody told me, oh, you only did 600K or you only did 500K, that would almost wash over me like water because that was irrelevant. What was relevant to me was those 3 things, and that was it. So that really helped me focus and go inwards and stay calm and efficient when there was so much other stuff going on.
And you had a support crew in the form of a couple of vehicles. Explain what the logistics were with those people that are involved with you behind the scenes.
Yeah, logistics were incredibly complex. It took about 6 months of planning, and there was 8 of them in the support crew. So we basically had a team of 4, a team of 3, and then my crew captain who kind of rotated amongst them. And the way we structured the teams is they worked in 12-hour shifts. So from midnight to noon and then noon to midnight. And we had the follow vehicle, which was like a VW California van. And that would be on my butt 24 hours a day. It never left my side. And that had things like nutrition. It had, all my electrolytes and hydration. It had medical care, basically things that could be, handed off on the road at a moment's notice. And then the other crew was usually driving ahead in a large RV that we had that had beds in it. And that crew would be on mandated rest. So they would be sleeping in 8-hour shifts while the RV was moving. They would be prepping food in the kitchen, and they would be running errands like going to get petrol, resupply, and things of that nature. And then every time I had a pit stop, which was for 10 minutes every 4 hours, the 2 vehicles would converge, pass, materials back and forth, do a quick rundown, and then the crews would shift and we'd keep going.
See, these 10-minute pit stops that were taking place every 4 hours, and I think in the very last stretch, they became maybe a little bit more frequent. In the beginning, it's great. You can just have a bit of time off the bike, rest your legs. Someone's going to give you a bit of a massage, I suppose, of an area. And then you get back on the bike. Great. At what point did it become a place where you didn't ever want to leave that pit stop? And then the thought of getting back on the bike, was there ever a period of time when it was just almost like you couldn't get back on that bike once you'd got off it?
No, there was never a moment. I just knew once I was in the event, like this was my job now. So whinging about it won't make a difference. My job is to get on the bike at 9.5 minutes into my pit stop. How I'm feeling about that emotionally was irrelevant. And the way I spoke to my team, and my crew captain coached the team, was, I'm not going to thank you for letting me rest. I'm going to thank you for helping me execute this record. And that's really the mindset and the ethos we took into it. And we called those 10 minutes pit stops because I wanted my team operating like an F1 team. Those 10 minutes were not 11 minutes. They were 10 minutes and I was riding. So we had a lot of logistics go in. I would come off the bike. My mechanic would take the bike. I would go into the RV, go to the loo. I would then sit on the massage table, get sports massage while I'm eating. I had 4 minutes to eat about 1,500 calories. And while I was eating and getting sports massage in the problem areas, my crew chief would give me a brief for the next 4 hours on the road ahead. And that was our process, 24 hours a day, with the exception where I would sleep an hour, hour and a half.
That's incredible.
It was relentless.
You deserve a job in F1. If this is your approach to all these, it's the minute things, but they do make a big difference.
They make an incredible difference. And this is where we see records be won or lost. It's like slippage in the logistics. And I absolutely wanted every single member of my crew to go into this event fully understanding their roles, being accountable for their roles, and also feeling like there's not a single thing more we could have done to prepare for all eventualities. And because of that, while there was a lot of surprises on the road, there wasn't a single thing that we weren't prepped for or couldn't handle. So I'm incredibly grateful for them and their energy and expertise.
How did you find eating along these 6 days? How was your stomach?
I would say eating and the sleep deprivation were the two hardest things. The cycling wasn't hard. It was those two. So for eating, I was trying to get a minimum of 11,000 calories a day. What this looked like was we started off wanting to have whole foods and real foods, but by the end of day 2, you just don't have enough blood going to your digestive system, so it becomes really hard to digest. So we switched to predominantly liquid foods. So we were sponsored by Huel. So we actually used a lot of Huel shakes, a lot of carb drinks, and we were just adding sugar to everything. And we were eating, I was trying to get about 100 grams of carbs an hour and 400 calories an hour approximately. And then every time I would come off the bike, every 4-hour period, I would try to eat about 1,000 to 1,500 calories. That would usually take the form of oats or porridge with heavy cream and jam, or bagels with cream cheese, basically whatever my stomach could tolerate. But what we found over time, probably by day 3, I was getting a lot of sores in my mouth because you're constantly eating, so you never actually get a break. So we did have to switch predominantly to soft foods as well. So it's almost like this death by 1,000 little cuts. It's not cycling that's hard. It's all these other little problems that start to crop up.
Yeah, I suppose because you've done all the work on your body to prepare it for a place where if you could just follow your set plan, bar any kind of, freak incidents, your body should be in a good place. It's the mind that you have to get over to kind of get that body going. But you can't train for 11,000 calories a day. That's just not, it's impractical. There's no real, I think I've heard people who've maybe tried to drink a lot of water when they eat to maybe expand their stomach. I think maybe Sean Conway talked about that, about when he did his Iron 105 challenge. But you never know. That's the thing, that's the unknown as well. You never know how your body's going to react to these external things that you're putting into it. And you did throw up on occasion as well.
Actually, yeah. So on the first day, At my very first pit stop, I think I was 120K and we just finished our first 4-hour block. And I had some cold pizza, but I ate it while I was lying on my stomach on the massage table. And I got the worst indigestion of my entire life. So I actually had to ride the next 4-hour block being unable to drink anything or eat anything because I was in so much pain. And actually, when I stopped riding at the end of that block, I threw up, I think 4 or 5 times, and that fixed it miraculously. But that was a big lesson learned right out of the gate, is don't eat when I'm on my stomach and try to eat warm foods that are more easily digestible. So bit of trial and error.
I'm sure there was a few kind of sweaty palms in those moments when you just, this is the very beginning.
Yeah.
This is how are you going to get through the next few days?
Yeah.
Just turns out puking is the solution.
Puking is the solution.
How much sleep did you get across this time?
So in 5.5 days, I got just under 8 hours of sleep.
Okay. In intervals of?
We usually did it in intervals of like an hour and a half. So for the first 2 nights, we did an hour and a half every night, usually between like 2 and 3:30 in the morning. That was like my witching hour when I was just like not in a good place. So we put the sleep then. Day 3, we pushed it to just cat naps. So like 15-minute naps.
Hang on, it was an hour and a half for one day.
Yeah.
Of sleep.
Yeah.
And then an hour and a half the next day.
Yeah. And then the next day.
So whilst you are in control of a bike, cycling on your own.
Yeah. And then the next night, night 3, we dropped it down. I think we were just doing 15 or 20-minute cat naps. But then we pushed it a little bit too far doing that, because by the night of day 4, going into day 5, I actually lost consciousness while riding my bike and crashed into a nettle bush from lack of sleep. So we had to give me, I think, a 2-hour break after that. But that sorted me right out and then helped get me to the finish line.
Okay. Is there any science behind what you thought this sleep pattern cycle would do? I know that typically we sleep in about 90-minute segments anyway, naturally, and we kind of come in and out of wakelessness. Was that about just saying, we'll just bank one of those and then hopefully that will just make me feel energized and then we'll see what happens the next day?
Yeah, so it was a bit of art and science. So I knew from my transcontinental races, I can comfortably manage 3 hours of sleep a night for unsupported racing and be okay, because this was crewed and I had a safety net around me. We were talking with my coach and he basically said, yeah, she can handle an hour and a half. So we decided to push to an hour and a half. And exactly to your point, REM cycles are about 90 minutes. So I would get 1 REM cycle. And hopefully that would be enough. And that's about as scientific as we got with it. And again, that seemed to work for us. And I think the important thing is to understand the difference between what you can do when you're crewed versus when you're unsupported. Because there were times, starting on day 4 was when I started to feel the sleep deprivation, but I forgot where I was. I forgot why I was riding a bike. I was still riding to my power and my heart rate. I just didn't know why I was doing it. So I needed my crew and my comms to basically be like, you're fine, you're not lost. You're doing an event, just keep pedaling, do exactly what you're doing, you're safe. So the sleep deprivation, I understood what I was going to be feeling, but until you feel that confusion and just kind of displacement, it's really hard to describe.
So along the way, people were following your journey. And I saw various videos and images of people coming out and celebrating and cheering you as you passed. It must have been a huge kind of motivation for you to see, even if it was just a brief flyby, you were having to like quickly wave at someone. Yeah.
So I didn't really have my phone on me for the event, so I didn't understand that there was like this big following happening. So when I started to see people on the side of the road and the crew started telling me what was happening, I got really overwhelmed. I was really confused because I didn't think the ride would get any attention. And I was incredibly humbled. And it was one of the things that really kept me going. And I think especially around Bristol area. And then there was some parts in Scotland that there was probably like 100 people that like came out in certain areas. And it was just, I was floored. Like, it was a game changer for me and for the crew to just know that people were supporting us and resonating with the story.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you arrived at Land's End and got the obligatory picture by the signposts. You were there an instant and then you were off again. There was no celebration of this is halfway. This was like, this is only halfway.
My partner and crew chief, Ryan, gave me 30 seconds off the bike to take a photo, and then he made me get right back on the bike and keep going. But that's exactly what we discussed. I said, I don't want to recognize the halfway point because that would lose momentum. So I actually had my 10-minute pit stop about 20 miles before Land's End. So we would just come in, we'd take our photo for the evidence, for the record, and then just take right off again. So that was planned and necessary, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to take you to the very end of your journey, because I think this is where, even though from everything you'd done in like the last 3/4 of the journey were projecting that you could smash this record, it becomes a case in these endurance events that actually it's made or broken in the last part of it, depending on how your body can be, how you react to the sleep deprivation. Do you remember much of what was going on back then? Because I know that your crew have written a lot about what you were doing, you were finding you very lucid and not really knowing where you are. Tell them about why you didn't know you were riding.
Yeah, so I would say the worst part for me in terms of lucidity was like that night of night 4 into the morning of day 5. But then after that, I had that extended break of 2 hours and that seemed to sort me out. So while I was still, pretty spaced out, I knew exactly, what was happening. And the last 300 miles of the event, we had really severe headwinds, actually going up the A99, which is not friendly riding anyways, difficult roads and a lot of elevation. And I remember feeling I had really lost the ability to control my temperature by that point. My body was just so stressed. So I remember having to take lots of stops to change my clothing, to take jackets on and off, gloves on and off. And we were really concerned about my nutrition and hydration and really wanting to make sure that I was eating as much as possible just to power me through to that finish line. Because to your point, while we knew we were ahead with such a significant headwind and with the athlete, being as fragile as they are in the very finishing stages, like nothing is a sure thing until you cross the finish line. So my crew was actually extra hard on me in probably the last 100 miles, just forcing me to eat as much as I could and drink as much as I could just to keep me propped up and finishing strong.
What helped you? What got you finishing strong? What got you through that last bit?
My process. So focus, discipline, and gratitude. So I had those words taped right where I could see them. And my focus was to maintain, my watts, my heart rate, look at the road ahead. My discipline was to ride as efficiently as possible. So I wanted to be tucked in that aero position. I wanted to be watching my body temperature and just cycling well. And then gratitude for knowing that we've made it this far. And I have 8 of my very best friends and family members in the car behind me that are not going to let me fail. So that's all I was thinking about in those final 100 miles.
So after 5 days, 11 hours, 14 minutes, surviving on about 90 minutes sleep a day, covering a distance of 2,700 kilometers, you rolled down towards the coast to a once again beautiful weather in John O'Groats, and you finished at the signpost that's there at the very place you started. What was going through your mind?
When I finished, all I felt was relief. So my legs were so fried by the time I came in to John O'Groats that I had to radio ahead and say, I need my partner Ryan to catch me in the bike because I couldn't really unclip. And if I put my leg down, it would probably give out. So he caught me and my bike, my crew lifted me off the bike, and I just remember crumpling and just sobbing from relief. I didn't know how far ahead of the record I was, and I didn't really care because I knew I had found my limits in that moment. And I was just so grateful. And I think we were all in tears, and we could finally let out all the emotions that we had been compartmentalizing over the last week to just stay focused and stay in control. So that was an incredible moment of emotional release for all of us. And the crew went and jumped in the sea, and I went to sit down and fall asleep. And it was just, it was a life-changing experience.
And how has it been in the last few weeks as it's been sinking in, as you've been seeing the world kind of process your achievement? Because this is not just about setting, a record. This is the outright record. This is like there's no one faster in the world that has covered that distance in those 2 points. No one. Like there's just, it stands on its own, which is an insane accomplishment. It's an insane thing to own and to have.
Yeah, it feels a little bit overwhelming. And again, I think for me, I'm surprised and humbled that so many people are interested in the story, because for me, it was always just about, finding my limits and seeing if I could, close a chapter in my life where I thought I would never achieve anything again. And it was a gift to myself and a way to recognize the charities. And I think the fact that we delivered this and we delivered it so successfully as a team, it still feels a little bit like a dream. But I think to me, having gone through the process, I view it as special but accessible, because I genuinely think anybody can do this. They just need to be willing to sacrifice the time and the energy and be willing to live in discomfort until they can get their body to the point where it's achievable. So
sounds easy.
Yeah. So on one hand, it's incredible, but I also think my story should show people that they're capable of doing incredible things. So, yeah.
You mentioned about the charities there. You've raised incredible amount of money for charities that are very important to yourself. Could you tell us a bit about them and why they're so important to you in your life?
I would love to. Yes. So for this challenge, we were fundraising for the Bike Project and Bikes for Refugees. The latter serves Scotland and the former serves England. And what both of these organizations do is they take used bicycles and they refurbish them and they distribute them to asylum seekers and refugees across the UK. And their work is so transformative because when these individuals come to the country, depending on their situation, they're not allowed to take jobs or hold employment. And a lot of them have children that need to go to school. They have no subsidized public transit. And some of them get paid less than £10 per week of support. So they face huge barriers in transportation. So getting bicycles to these individuals means they can go to language lessons, they can take their kids to school, they can attend appointments, get medical care. And this is really, transformative in their lives, and it helps them join a community, really. So for me, it was really important because a bicycle has changed my life. It's empowered me. It's helped me heal from my experiences. And I think bicycles and the way these two charities use bicycles does the exact same thing in another form for others. So thank you to everyone who's supported the charities. And we've raised about £20,000 at this point for them. So I'm delighted.
It's amazing. And it is something that some people can take for granted, just owning a bike, and not recognize the freedom that it gives someone. And like you said, the empowerment as well. It's having that independence and pushing yourself physically to accomplish things that you didn't realize you had the capability to do themselves.
Exactly. Like we have the privilege of using bikes for recreation, right? But bikes are empowerment, they're freedom, they're access for a lot of people. And so this project was really about, celebrating the cycling community, the inclusivity of that cycling community, and helping show newcomers that they are welcome and there's a whole group of people waiting to meet them.
And I want to just talk briefly about your experience with refugees and asylum seekers. I've read that you said everyone has an obligation, if they're born in a safe room, to open the door when someone in danger knocks. Can you tell us a bit about your experience?
Yeah, so growing up in Canada, my family, we were emergency caretakers for children. So we usually saw children come from dangerous situations dropped off at our door at all hours of the night. And we housed them anywhere from, a few nights to a few years, depending on their situation before they were able to be taken into the social services system. So I grew up being quite aware of, material deprivation and how that shows up and impacts individuals. And now that I'm in a relatively fortunate position, I have my own home. I decided I wanted to really use that for good and have the spaces occupied. So I've been working with several different referral agencies for the last 4 years, and I house single female asylum seekers or refugees in my home, and I help them transition to life in the UK, heal from whatever they've been through, and then just give them a safe space where they can, start feeling empowered and have more control over their lives.
It's incredible. I've seen and witnessed this. We're actually recording this in your home today. It's incredibly thoughtful and kind of you to open your door to people. I know it takes a lot to kind of have people in your own personal space. I have my own experiences of that as well within my family. And obviously, it's quite obvious to kind of maybe see what you are doing and helping with for the other people by bringing them into your home. But what does it bring to you?
For me, it's a way to, I suppose, say thank you and give back for all the help I've received throughout my life. So when I was sick, we were the recipient of, charity. As well, we worked with several charities who helped my family come and stay closer to me when I was sent abroad for medical care. So I know firsthand, the transformative impact that like community and volunteers make in somebody's life. And I think now that I have a seat at the proverbial table, it's a gift for me to be able to give back to other people who need it. So for me, what it gives me is, I suppose, understanding that I haven't just taken what's been given to me for granted, but I'm actually paying it forward as well. And that's something I've seen my mother do her whole life, with the foster care. And it's just something I have the privilege to do now.
It's incredibly inspiring. So, thank you for doing something like that into this and making the world a better place. I know that you are keen to get back on the bike in a short amount of time, and I do not want to be in the way of your plan, as I know how your precision plan is so important to you. So we're going to close things in a minute, but I just want to close with, if I've not already, and if your story has not already proved how much of a badass you are, I want to give you my thoughts on a few little things which I've noticed about you, which I think makes you an absolute badass.
All right.
Okay. Regardless of what we've just talked about, there are two things. There's three things. The first, that you finished this journey on a Friday, and then went back to work on Monday.
Yeah, don't recommend that. It was not great.
But I just love that. That's the plan. I've got my weekend to recover. Then we're back on it. Okay, that's badass number one. 2, you wore bib shorts that had a rip in the side of them when you came off your bike in the transcontinental.
They were my favorite bib shorts. Absolute
badass. Like you could have got kit sponsors, but no, you're going to wear things that've got holes in them, and I love that. We're all people who have bits of gear that we absolutely love. Why should we feel the need to bring in new stuff if it still works? I'm someone who runs in trainers that's got holes all over them, things like that. Like until it stops working and doing its job, it's still part of my gear. So I very much respect you, and I think that's absolutely badass. Number 2. Number 3 is my personal favorite, Sarah, is the fact that even though you are in the middle of an incredible record-breaking challenge, you still wear wired headphones that are attached to a phone, which is impractical because when you get off the bike, you've got to unplug the wire.
Yeah.
And now I've done this. When I cycled LEJOG, I had my wired headphones in, and it kind of went underneath my jackets.
Oh.
And then it came but which is even worse. And then sometimes I was getting off the bike more regularly than you were. And then, you have to unplug the wire. But it's badass because it looks so much cooler.
Does it? Okay.
Wired headphones.
It's old school, but
it's old school, but it's just, wireless headphones. No one looks cool in wireless headphones. I've not found one that look cool these days. But the wired headphones look absolutely badass. And I love how you're just like committed to being like, yeah, this is the way. I could have wireless because, technology might be better, but actually it's not better because it doesn't look cool.
Exactly. And it's just one more thing to charge. And who wants that?
Exactly. That's my argument. It's one more thing to charge. When you're self-supported, when you want to be off, and you've got to minimize everything that you've got to do off the bike. I actually haven't got any wired headphones at the moment. They're broken because they break quite often.
I have some I can lend you.
Well, I bought some yesterday. After I saw them, I was like, yes, just get some more. And I bought some more. So there we go. I'm going to be proudly sporting the wired headphones with absolute confidence that other people like you can still do it as well. So I thank you for that.
Thanks.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I've absolutely loved your story and absolutely think it's remarkable. So it's been an absolute pleasure of mine to be here.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you want to find out more information about any of the guests, please check out the show notes where you'll also find links to things mentioned in the conversation. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a look through the past recordings. There's so many more incredible stories for you to find. And I can't wait for you to enjoy them. Thank you.